week, I talked with Greg and Susan Finke about their newest book, Joining Jesus as a Family, How to Raise Your Children to Be Followers of Jesus. We'll continue our discussion this week. As we talk about where you want your child to end up, we find many parents concerned that their children, youth, or young adults will stray away from the Christian faith. It happens a lot. In their book, they state, I can hear the hope, but I can also hear the fear. To be honest, the fear comes from a growing realization that what we are currently doing in our attempt to raise lifelong followers of Jesus isn't working. And here's the thing, it isn't. For quite some time, the way U.S. children and U.S. congregations have been raising our children has not consistently resulted in them becoming lifelong followers of Jesus. The statistics are stunning. The number of teens and young adults who walk away from the church and even their faith have been on the rise for decades. Both Lifeway and Barna Research estimate that between 65 and 70% of teens leave the church and abandon their faith by their freshman year of college. Every parent thinks their child is among the 30% that will never do that. But in congregations Susan and Greg have worked with, they hear heartbreaking stories from parents and grandparents who have children and grandchildren who are no longer part of the church. So does Family Shield Ministries. What we are currently doing is not working well enough. Here's why. For generations, parents have assumed they are fulfilling their responsibility to raise Christian children if they have been baptized, take them to worship, and make sure they are participating in Christian education programming the congregation provides. If the child complacently participated, parents consider it a win. We'll discuss this further today and continue our discussion about their new book. Again, my guests are Greg and Susan Finke, authors of Joining Jesus as a Family and the founders of Dwelling 114. This is Kay Meyer, president of Family Shield Ministries and your host for today's program. And this is part 2 of a 2-part series. So, thank you again for being my guest, Greg and Susan. Let's talk briefly about the statistics that I mentioned and why this is so difficult for today's families. Greg, can you just flush that out a little bit more? I read it, but you live it. So.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's heartbreaking, right?
It is.
Parents think they're doing what they're supposed to do, right? They take the responsibility of raising their children seriously. But unfortunately, they have been given a strategy that doesn't lead to the outcomes they are hoping for. It seems like it is time in memoriam that for generations after generation, all you had to do was get them baptized, bring them to church, make sure they got the proper Christian education that, was required, and then they'd be off and running. But what's changed over the decades is that we are sending our kids off not into a culture that reinforces that, but rather questions it, challenges it. And here's the thing. Our kids are going out, like we said in our last episode, they're bored because they have been told to memorize and discuss and study and recite, but they haven't really experienced the joy and fulfillment and fun of living a life of joining Jesus on his mission, and therefore they are also leave the home unconvinced. They're not sure that it has that much power. They've not really seen it transform anybody's life. They really haven't experienced, some of the cool things that God does when we step out in faith in daily life, and therefore, when they go off and now they're other people are questioning that or challenging them, or they're just seeing other people that seem to be great folks that are not following Jesus at all. And all of a sudden, things unravel. And I think, it always has been a suspect strategy In the Gospels, we see that Jesus has quite a few other things going on to disciple, to train his followers. But we've kind of settled for going to church rather than following Jesus and being church. And therefore, the culture no longer is one that reinforces a kind of a religious lifestyle. And we are simply raising our kids to be religious rather than to be, more of an intentional, deep, loving relationship with Jesus and following him as one that is our guide and leader, trusted and faithful. And I know that maybe sounds like something that is fairly easy to switch, but it's the biggest difference between knowing about the faith and having experiences that verify and show the power of not only our faith, but the one in whom we put our faith. And like we like to jokingly say, it turns out Jesus does more than go to church on Sunday. And once our kids find that out and start to participate with him, that's when they become self-motivated and convinced, and they now know how to be followers of Jesus, even as they lead for college or for their career. And that's what we're going for now, and probably should have been going for all along.
I often hear young adults say when they've gone on a mission trip or even to a camp, how it transformed their lives. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be thinking more of doing those kind of things with our youth and young adults. But let's talk a little bit about why love is so important. Susan, you talk a lot about love. Just kind of introduce that topic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just as a little tangent to what you just said, we also have done a lot of mission trips and had heard those same things. Mm-hmm. What we need to realize is that every day we walk out our door, we're walking.
Well, that's very true.
On the mission field. Yes. And so if we teach that to our kids, that every day our lifestyle of love mm-hmm. Is what makes a difference. You say love is our superpower. Mm-hmm. Love comes from God. Mm-hmm. God is love, and we all have that superpower because he loves us so much. But just like a superhero, like any of our superheroes, it only works if you use it. Mm-hmm. So if we can hear about the love of God every Sunday that we're in church or Sunday school or whatever, but if we don't use that love that we receive, that we hear about, if we just put it in our pocket, then we haven't fully, we haven't been able to take advantage of the full power of God that he gives us. And our kids, even as little kids, can really understand that superpower. They're going out every day filled with the power that God gives them and can give it freely out. And even the littlest thing, sharing and having empathy and listening and, whatever they are doing with their friends and playmates and how that is them using their superpower of love, and that is God working through them.
Yes.
So that their friends can experience God's love too.
Right. I had my grandson, something he did, as I read this about superpower and love, I've got to tell him about the superpower, but he was confirmed, he's 14, recently in Minnesota, and we went up for his confirmation. But just prior to that, he was writing his testimony, and he had some bullies at school bullying him, and that really upset him. But he said, when he did his testimony, that he chose to forgive them. And then they were nice to him afterwards. And he said, that's God's work. And he just preached. It was like, whoa, that's great. But that's because he's been taught love and that forgiveness is important, and so he chose to forgive them. I don't know if he told them that or not, but he told us in his little testimony that he gave. And when I was reading your book, I was thinking, I got to tell Luke that he's got superpowers.
Yes,
because
and that superpower of God's love is what allowed him to be able to forgive.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's God's love that changed the people. It's God's love that changes people. We can't.
No, we
but
can't.
When we're sharing and God's love, then we, in tangible ways, then God works to change people.
You bet. Yeah, Greg, just a comment about why are things like love, joy, and kindness superpowers. I just love that little part of your book.
Yeah, well, and it's right there in the Bible, right? But we tend to just talk about it, memorize it, discuss it, rather than really go, wow, let me go find people that don't have love or who are, worse, unlovable. That's when you really start to see the power of love. We say it's a superpower because, number one, it comes from God. And in fact, the Bible says that, God is love. And so our experience, it's not just a scriptural truth, but the experience is that that God's love is the only power in the universe that can actually change a person from the inside out. Our disapproval, our anger, our shaming, none of that changes anybody, but God's love does. And again, it's easy to love our family. It's easy to love our church family. And frankly, that's where the line kind of stops. And therefore, that's why the love doesn't seem like that big of a deal, because we're sharing it primarily with people who already have it. Mm-hmm. Now, we're certainly not saying stop sharing it with people that already have it. Mm-hmm. But if you want to see the superpower at work, then take that next step. Share that love with a bully. Mm-hmm. Share that love with someone that is unloved, maybe the kid that's sitting by themselves at the lunch table. Go share that love with the unloved one, and you will see a powerful effect and the child then that, our child that has shared that love, that becomes something that we can help them become more intentional and consistent at. Now they really are going to have lots and lots of stories, lots and lots of experiences. It's not just a lesson that they learned, at midweek one time, but they will have stories. They will be convinced. They will be able to advocate others doing it too, because they've taken the ride. They've been in the boat with Jesus, and they know what it's like.
Yes. I want to make some announcements, and then we'll come back and continue talking about the 5 mission practices. I'll share a little bit more about that and ask their input. Family Shield Ministries is composed of Christians who care about families and the gospel, transforming lives now and for eternity. The Family Shield radio program is aired on more than 50 stations throughout the United States and on many podcast platforms. We also coordinate other educational and outreach services that serve individuals and their families. Thanks for listening. This week, we're giving away the booklet, Helping Your Child Grow Through Faith Conversations. To receive a copy, call the Response Center, 1-877-250-8416, or email us at witnesstofamily@gmail.com. Your prayers and support allow Family Shield to continue to reach and equip individuals and their families for Christ. Your support makes our work in the ripe and plentiful harvest possible. Thank you. If you're a Thrivent member, you can designate your Thrivent Choice dollars to support Family Shield. Go to www.thrivent.com/Thrivent Choice or call them at 1-800-847-4836, and they'll help you. All Thrivent gifts support our outreach services and ministries. Greg and Susan, would you share a little bit about how our listeners can obtain your book?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. they can either go immediately to Amazon.com, because the book literally just came out a couple weeks ago. But later in August, if they want to order, they can order from us personally. Just go to our website, dwelling114.org, and then we begin to offer discounts for the book, beginning with just 4. If you just buy 4 books, you get 10% off, and the more books you buy, the more of a discount you get. So Amazon.com immediately, or in August, they can go to our website.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, growing ability to use your superpower on others by helping them practice the following skills. You had several skills here. Seek the kingdom, hear from Jesus in the Gospels, talking with people, doing good, and ministering through prayer. Share a little bit about how you do that.
You bet. So, if we are saying that we want to be able to help our children live a life of love, and as they join Jesus on his mission. So we're going with Jesus, we're followers of Jesus, and we want to live a life of love for the good of others. Then there are just some real simple skills that we see right out of the Gospels that put us in position, because we're not manufacturing things. Our kids aren't making things happen. They're looking for what God's already up to. They're looking for people that are ready. They're looking for the good God's prepared in advance for them to do, Ephesians 2:10. And so keep seeking the kingdom is all about watching, living with awareness, anticipate that God, in fact, is doing things in other people's lives and setting them up so that we can seek and recognize and respond. And then hearing from Jesus and his word is about, when they're little, we read them Bible stories so they get to know Jesus. And as they get older, we encourage them to, read the Bible themselves. So again, they're getting to know Jesus and can understand what they can be watching for and what he gives them to believe and do. Talking with people and doing good are both ways that we can respond. We talk with people, we find out what they're thinking, what they're excited about, or what they're afraid of, what they're dealing with, what they're burdened with. Doing good is just an action of service or of laughter, or in some way putting our love into action. And then ministering through prayer is all about praying for people, obviously, and especially our friends that don't know Jesus. But also when we have opportunity, when we have been doing those other practices, we'll often be in position to, when our friend is hurting for some reason, that we can say, what, I pray for you a lot anyway. Do you want me to pray with you right now? Mm-hmm. And that can be a very simple but powerful way to help them experience the good news of God right there, as our child would pray for their buddy who, maybe got a bad grade, or maybe they got pushed around, or maybe their parents are going through something hard. Can be very powerful. So those are those skills or abilities that, like with anything else, whether I'm playing the piano or learning how to play basketball or doing my math equations, I got to practice, and the more I practice, the better I get. And the same is true in following Jesus. We practice these things, and we actually get better, more skillful mm-hmm. at joining Jesus and living a life of love.
That's great. And I love, they're simple. They're things that we do every day with our children. But as you look at Jesus in the Gospels, you see he's doing this with his disciples, and it's like, storytelling. Jesus was such a master storyteller to share the stories and how effective those stories can be in sharing Christ as well. So thank you so much.
I can only just put a big red circle around what you just said. If we value the experiences our kids have had during the day, then why wouldn't we eagerly invite the stories and to share our own as well? Mm-hmm. And that will, more than any other kind of, if you will, strategy, to use a word, that will help them realize the value that they that living this life really has, and to learn from their mistakes and to And yeah, if we sin, we want to confess it, but learn from our mistakes. That's something I think we too often forget, is that Jesus didn't condemn and dismiss disciples when they made mistakes or outright sinned. He called them on it, but then he coached them through it, right? So they learned and became more, wise and more, and their skill level went up, being able to humble themselves, for instance, or putting their trust in the Father more, rather than being afraid, or rather than being, full of themselves and, who's first and who's best and who's greatest. And Jesus kept working with them, but they learned from their mistakes. Yes. Failure, when you're a follower of Jesus, isn't really failure, it's training.
Yes.
And we can remember that as parents as well.
Absolutely.
And that's why those 5 practices are so important, that we teach our kids those practices so that every day they are looking for opportunities.
Right.
And when they get home, we all share the stories of our day.
Good.
And how we saw God working.
Absolutely.
And what did God do, or what did we miss? And then pray about it together. And we pray in the morning with our kids before they go out, so that all day long that becomes that rhythm. And we know with our youngest daughter, she was in college already, and we heard her speaking to others, and she said, I knew my parents were going to ask me every day about how I saw God. So I made sure I looked.
Good. That's good. That's great. Well, yeah, prayer is such a great opportunity to share Christ with people in so many ways. Family Shield is promoting right now, again, we do it every year, our family prayer walk. This year, because we started it during the pandemic, we're including friends now. But when we started it, it was really families can walk and pray together, and we can help our children learn how to pray, and then ask a neighbor, is there something we can pray for you? So it's an opportunity to both teach them and also to reach out to those in their neighborhood. And I just want to throw that in. We're working on producing a new booklet that'll be out soon. Why is it so important to help our children be humble? You talk a lot about teaching the children how to be humble, and boy, I'm remembering Jesus and the disciples who wanted to be first, and I'm thinking, boy, he was teaching them then too, wasn't he?
He was.
And it just, all of the stories and all of the things he was doing when they were fighting to sit next to him. And so why is it important that we teach our children to be humble, and how do we do that?
Well, if you look at the Gospels again, we don't have to make up a discipling process, because Jesus is already showing us in the Gospels. And what are the 2 things that he really works on the disciples a lot? One is that, their fear and doubt, right? So he's discipling them, training them to trust the Father more and more, just like Jesus trusts the Father more. But the other thing that is in the way, besides fear and doubt, is, like you just said, is just that being full of ourselves, that me first, I'm the smartest, I'm the best, that keeps us then, the fear and the doubt, or the lack of humility, the arrogance, the pride, or even a sense of unworthiness, which is also its own something we have to set aside. We have to set aside ourselves for that love to flow through. So we have God's love in abundance. And then as I am training my child to trust and the Father more, to have that courage that comes from trusting God, that releases some more love. And then the final thing is humbling myself. It's kind of like it says in 1 Peter 5, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves under God's mighty hand that he might lift you up. And that's Peter writing that. So Peter knew from his experience with Jesus that once he learned to humble himself, God would be able to flow through with his love and even more powerfully and generously. And that's why humility is so important. It's not just so that we remember our place or go around with our tail between our legs. It's something much more powerful and helpful than that. It's living with a sense of, hey, God's smarter than me. He's more capable than me. So I want to live under his mighty hand and respond to him. There are other people around me that have something to contribute, to collaborate with, and that we're better off when we are, humbling ourselves before God and humbling ourselves in the midst of the other people with me. We end up being much better, much stronger, much more generous with God's love because of that.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And our kids need to see us as parents practicing that as well. And so as we show that we can learn from others, that we sometimes do things wrong, we go to God, we go to others, we say, I'm sorry, we say, I forgive you. They have to see us doing that as well. And that's where there's a difference from helping your children be humble. We don't want to humiliate our kids. We want to teach them to trust God more.
Well, I think a big thing, Kay, and we do kind of conclude the book with this, is just to remember to be intentional about helping our kids live in a village of folks that can reinforce the lifestyle and the beliefs that our family has. We want them to be able to have friends that don't know Jesus. We want them to be able to be on mission with Jesus, looking for the one lost sheep that God has around them. But we also, on the other hand, want to be able to say, hey, we need some other non-parent adult mentors involved with our kids' life. We want them to have peers that don't know Jesus, but we also want them to be interacting with peers who do know Jesus. And so that they have that kind of reinforcement. We talk about that as, kind of building a village, because like the African proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child. We are wise to build networks of relationships with others, both peers as well as adults, that can reinforce and give example, so that kids have that kind of confirmation and verification.
Time is just
for
about up.
This life that we're living.
Again, my guests have been Susan and Greg Finke. Their new book, Joining Jesus as a Family, How to Raise Your Children to be Followers of Jesus. Blessings on your day.
You've been listening to Family Shield, a production of Family Shield Ministries. Its mission is to educate and equip people through the power of the gospel to know Christ, grow in His Word, and to strengthen individuals and their families. To learn how you can obtain resources or support the ministry, go to www.familyshieldministries.com or write Family Shield Ministries, 7045 Parkwood Street, St. Louis, Missouri 63116. And tune in again next week for Family Shield.